slashing at the hippogriff every time it tried to attack her. Shiro managed to peel back quite a few feathers in the process, leaving several bald marks on the spots where she wanted to cut. Should the hippogriff lunge in for another attack, her next slash will hopefully draw some blood. However, that was rather hopeful considering the fact that the hippogriff was completely wary of her now. Who wouldn't? If an opponent could dodge your every strike and stab you near the vitals, it would be dumb to keep trying to attack that opponent. Narrowing its eyes at Shiro warily, the hippogriff stood up on its hind legs and flapped its wings, recognizing that movement to be the actions required for wind blades. Shiro quickly jumped to the side and summoned her bow. Cracking against the ground, Shiro could see the wind blades destroy a part of the platform. Understanding that a single hit of the wind blade could severely injure her, she had to be careful whenever its wind aura was cancelled. Pulling back her bowstring while still in the air, she fired at the hippogriff's eye without hesitation. Asterisk Poochie. Asterisk Key. Crying out in pain. The hippogriff didn't expect Shiro to react so fast, and a single mistake had cost it its eye. Glaring at her with its remaining eye, the hippogriff decided to just lunge at her with everything it's got in an attempt to overwhelm her. As long as it can get a single hit in, it'll be able to kill her. Smirking slightly, Shiro observed the hippogriff's movements carefully and dodged its attacks at the last moment. Since it wasn't as strong or as powerful as the Minotaur, dodging the attacks was rather easy for Shiro to accomplish. However, as it was currently unleashing a flurry of attacks, she had to be patient about her counter. She needed to wait until it exhausted its stamina before she could deal the killing blow. Seeing as things weren't going its way, the hippogriff flapped its wings and soared into the sky. Since it didn't activate the wind aura, Shiro could guess that it wanted to kill her with the wind blades. Spreading out her own wings, she chased after it. Unfortunately, she was just a little slower, so she started to lag behind the beast as time went on. Narrowing her eyes, she could see the beast glancing back every so often to check if she was still behind it. Frowning slightly, Shiro summoned her bow and started to fire arrows at its back. Reactivating the wind aura, the hippogriff deflected the arrows, but it prevented him from attacking Shiro, which was good. I would try to circle around or predict where he'll be to catch up, but with the speed difference, I doubt it'll work. I should head back to the platform while keeping it busy with arrows. Shiro thought to herself and started to retreat. Since there wasn't a fail condition in regards to the hippogriff escaping, she wasn't afraid of that. Instead, it would be more troublesome if she started to run out of stamina thanks to using the wings. To maintain flight was rather stressful and her body was already starting to ache. Landing back on the platform while continuing to shoot arrows at the beast, Shiro made sure it didn't have the chance to send wind blades at her. Looking back, the hippogriff was annoyed that Shiro was back at the platform. It couldn't hit her with any of its attacks, so it wanted to use its superior speed to kill this cockroach of an enemy. But she gave up and went back to the platform and shot arrows from hundreds of meters away. Since that was the case, it wanted to see how long she can keep this up. Little did it know, Shiro was probably one of the most tenacious people it would ever meet. She was someone that fought a minotaur for several hours just so that she could annoy it to death due to her low attack power. Shooting arrows at a hippogriff was much easier than trying to dodge attacks from a minotaur for several hours, as even a close miss could shatter her bones. Between the two, Shiro would definitely prefer to use the hippogriff as a practice tool. ####. Quite a long time had passed as Shiro understood the hippogriff's tactic. In her mind, not only was this hippogriff a giant coward, it was also the most annoying kind of enemy that people can fight against. One that kept delaying and delaying and delaying because they couldn't kill the enemy. It was like a little kid who kept trying to annoy you because you couldn't hit him since he was a child, and you were an adult. God knows how many people just wanted to kick the annoying kid across the field like a football. As for Shiro and the hippogriff, she was the adult and he was the kid who kept annoying her. However, two can play that game as Shiro didn't stop firing her arrows. All she had to do was fire her arrows while the hippogriff needed to constantly fly and keep its body in the air. Once it got tired and had to come down, she was going to torture the crap out of him. And as she predicted, the hippogriff was beginning to feel extremely tired as its body swayed in the wind. The only place for it to rest was at the platform, as it was within the boundaries of the trial. If it was to leave too far, It'd be killed automatically due to the nature of this trial. Try as it might, it could not fight against the limits of its body and had to descend towards the platform. Seeing this, Shiro almost looked like she had a crazed grin on her face as her torture target was finally coming down. The moment it did, she could finally relieve her anger that had been building up, feeling her malevolent glare on its body. The hippogriff couldn't help but feel fear creeping into its heart. The moment its claw touched the platform, Shiro lunged towards it like a rabid animal that had found some prey. "Come here, you little sh*t," Shiro shouted out while grabbing her dagger. The next few scenes could only be described as horrific as the cries of the hippogriff never stopped. Blood splattered everywhere, dyeing the white platform with blood as the organs were thrown aside. By the time the hippogriff's cries ended, there was not a piece of its body that was whole. The beak was ripped out along with its tongue, and the limbs were bent in strange ways as the tendons had been cut apart. Looking at her dagger that was on the verge of breaking, she threw it aside since the next attack would definitely break it in half, and she'd rather not use a weapon that'd break the moment someone breathed on it. Cracking her neck, Shiro sat down and waited for her to be teleported back to the white space with the stone tablet. After waiting for a few moments, she could feel her fatigue fade away once more as she was now sitting in front of the stone tablet. "See? You didn't need to rain down the might of the sun into my eyes every time you teleport me," Shiro complained since it happened suddenly without light burning her eyes. Glancing towards the stone tablet, she watched as words started to materialize. On the surface, "You have completed the trial of flight. The next trial is the trial of strength. As you have completed 2 trials, you have the choice of stopping here and obtaining either one in the form of a divinity. However, should you continue, you may obtain the full divinity, but doing so may disable you." "That's fine. Continue." Shiro nodded her head since the full divinity was her goal to begin with. Both the divinity of victory and the divinity of flight were good in their own regard, but it was only when all 3 were combined would the divinity of Nike truly be worth it. Plus, once she completed the trial of strength, she'd be allowed to participate in the demi-trials which represented Nike's siblings, giving her that extra boost. The next trial is the trial of strength. Trial of strength. Defeat the champion of strength. A weapon will be provided for you. Raising her eyebrow, Shiro blinked and found herself in front of an armory of sorts. There were weapons lining the walls of this armory, and she had to pick one for her to use against the champion of strength. Naturally, there was only one choice that would fit this occasion, and that was the spear. After all, the champion of strength was someone with an unnatural amount of power behind each attack, and the spear was perfect for using his own momentum against him. Grabbing the spear, she twirled it in her hands for a short moment before stepping out of the armory. Finding herself in the middle of a coliseum of sorts, she could see a muscular figure walking towards her with 2 large axes in his hands. Entering a stance with her spear, Shiro didn't say anything since the final trial was simple. There was no fancy gimmick or anything to learn. She just needed to kill the champion of strength. The champion of strength was a large, muscular man who wore nothing else other than a pair of gloves, some pants, and a metal helmet which covered his face. Without saying anything, he stomped towards Shiro and threw one of his axes without warning, widening her eyes. Shiro quickly ducked to the side. Bang! Glancing back at the axe that was firmly embedded into the wall, Shiro couldn't help but feel a chill down her spine. The speed of that axe was comparable to one of the Minotaur's attacks, which meant that his strength was much higher than what she had expected. However, that's a given when one remembers that the divinity of Nike is usually taken as the second divinity, meaning the person had already been reinforced by one divinity. Their physical prowess would be much higher than Shiro, so the champion must provide them a suitable amount of challenge. This might be harder than what I had expected. Shiro mused to herself while raising her spear to parry the incoming attack. Shifting her body so that the axe would slide off her spear, she redirected the attack to the ground. Bang! Without even reacting to his failed strike, the champion turned his body and slammed his fist directly against her spear. Feeling the force of his punch through her spear, Shiro could see the metal bending slightly from the punch as her body was launched away due to the force. Crashing against the ground, Shiro coughed a few times before standing up. Wiping the blood that was flowing down the corner of her lips, she narrowed her eyes towards the champion. When he punched her, it felt like it was instantaneous as he didn't hesitate to punch her. Watching him walk up to the axe that was embedded into the wall, Shiro wondered how she could counter his attacks with the exception of forcing him to run into her spear, with his reaction speed and power being superior to her. She had to try her best to find a gap. Since that's the case, I'll try to overwhelm him first, she thought to herself and dashed towards him. Seeing this, the champion swung his axe towards her as it made a whistling sound from the speed of which it cut through the air, stabbing her spear into the ground. She vaulted over his axe and slashed her spear against his shoulder. Widening her eyes at the small cut, Shiro clicked her tongue and used his forearms as a platform and jumped away, making some distance between the two of them. His body is quite tough thanks to his muscles. If I want to harm him, I need to hit the areas that aren't protected, such as the gaps between his muscles. Shiro thought to herself with narrowed eyes. Glancing at his body, her next target was going to be the area between his forearms and biceps. There were no muscles protecting that area, and it might even disable one of his arms depending on how good his pain tolerance is. Of course, if she gets a good shot in, she might even be able to pierce through and destroy his elbows, which would truly give her an upper hand in the fight. Stomping down, she dashed towards him and twisted her body, slamming the tip of her spear against the axe. She tried her best to knock it to the side so that it'd open his arm for her attack, but the champion's grip on the axe was firm and it refused to move out of the way. Clicking her tongue, Shiro pushed the pommel against the ground and used it as a pole to help her kick against his chest. However, his body was unmovable like a sturdy wall, and no matter how hard she tried to kick, he didn't react at all. Pushing herself away from him, she quickly raised the spear above her and pushed his axe to the side before it could cut her in half. Using the pommel of her spear, she slammed it against the champion's crotch, finally getting a reaction out of him. Shiro watched as he started to stumble back from the pain. What would you look at that? A man's biggest weakness. Shiro raised her eyebrow and charged at the champion without giving him a moment to recuperate. Piercing his arm, she made sure she stabbed it as deep as she could before kicking towards the champion's crotch area once more. Unfortunately, her kick was grabbed by his large hands. Can we talk about this? Shiro forced a smile since she couldn't retract her leg. *KRR. Feeling her bones creaking on the edge of breaking, Shiro knew that she needed to force him to let go before her leg is disabled. Once that happened, she'd be a sitting duck, literally. Using her spare leg to push up his helmet, she stabbed towards his throat with her spear. Before her spear could stab his throat, he let go of her leg, which caused her body to fall down, and the spear hit his chest instead. Seeing that only a little bit of the tip pierced his muscles, Shiro's smile couldn't help but twitch. Muscle bro, why are your muscles so hard? You can literally not give a *T about weapons, you know. Shiro asked while making some distance between them. Hearing no reply, she only shrugged and charged towards him before he could grab the axe that he had dropped in order to catch her foot before she could kick him in the crotch, slashing towards his wrist. She used the pommel to block the other axe he had in his spare hand. But just before she could attack, she felt danger in front of her and flipped her body up into a handstand using the spear as a bar, seeing the champion's foot where her body was a moment ago. Shiro knew that her ribs would have shattered if he kicked her at full force. Pushing her body off the spear, she stood on his shoulders and sat down as if he was giving her a shoulder ride, crossing her legs. She tried her best to strangle him while pulling against his helmet. Seeing the champion drop his axe and reach towards her, she uncrossed her legs and pushed against each of his arms, stopping him from reaching out to grab her. The harder he tried, the easier it was for Shiro to take off his helmet. Once that happened, she'd be able to target his eyes and mouth as a weak point. Gritting her teeth, Shiro had to try her best so that she could keep a good grip on the helmet. Why don't you help me take off your helmet? Not many people get to enjoy the feeling of my legs, you know. Shiro taunted. *clack. Hearing the sound of something unclipping, the helmet suddenly came off as her body was pushed off his shoulders. Throwing the helmet to the side, Shiro dived around his legs and grabbed her spear, stepping away from the champion. She twisted her body and launched the spear toward his head. However, when she saw his face, She couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. Point one of his eyes were sewn such with some strings while the other was bloodshot and his mouth was completely destroyed. Now that she had a better look at his throat, she could see large scars wrapping around his entire neck. While she was curious about the circumstances, her main focus was to kill him and finish this trial so that she could obtain her divinity. With her spear flying towards his head, the champion quickly grabbed it and saw Shiro dashing towards him. Throwing it back at her, Shiro ducked to the side and jumped towards his head. Using her index and middle finger, she gouged towards his only working eye and ripped out his eyeball. In one swift movement, hearing a muffled cry of pain, Shiro kicked off his head and jumped back towards her spear. Without his sense of sight, the champion wasn't able to locate her, and the best he could do was to thrash around him in hopes of hitting her. But now that he was just throwing punches around at random, Shiro could easily bypass his defenses. With a single thrust of her spear, she pierced through his head, starting at the empty eye socket where she ripped out his eye. As her spear pierced the champion's head, Shiro felt her fatigue disappear along with her injuries. Finding herself back in front of the stone tablet for a third time, she glanced up at the words, "You have completed the trial of strength." As you have completed the 3 trials, victory, flight, and strength, you have obtained the qualifications of the full divinity of Nike. Would you like to continue with the sub-trials in order to receive further benefits? Yes. Without hesitating, Shiro agreed since she was only allowed 1 divinity outside of the 5 primordial divinities. If she was to give up on further rewards for this divinity, she would have punched herself in the face. Which sub-trial would you like to attempt first? Zealous, Trial of Rivalry. Kratos, Trial of Strength. Bia, Trial of Force. Thinking about it for a moment, Shiro wondered which one she should try first. Trial of Rivalry. Since she was going to do all of them, she might as well start from the first one. Due to the difficulty of the Trial of Rivalry, you only need to land 5 attacks. 5 attacks. Before she realized it, she found herself in the middle of the sky. Pausing for a moment, she glanced down and saw that she was currently falling through the air. Standing up straight, she crossed her arms and wondered why she was even falling. I thought the trial was rivalry. Why the F***ck am I falling? Shiro muttered while glancing around her. Suddenly, she felt danger behind her and quickly ducked to the side. However, the arrow seemed to curve around and try to pierce through her head. Widening her eyes, she summoned her bow and blocked it before it could pierce her. Blocking the arrow, Shiro glanced back and saw a shadow version of herself. It was essentially a silhouette, but had a pair of glowing red eyes instead. You want me to fight myself while falling?" Shiro raised her eyebrow and fired an arrow back towards her shadow. Clang, seeing her shadow block her arrow the same way she did. Shiro finally realized why it said, "Due to the difficulty of the Trial of Rivalry, you only need to land 5 attacks." Since she only needed to land 5 attacks, this was going to be easy. All she needed to do was trade blow for blow so that she could meet the requirements. Adjusting her body so that she could be closer to her clone, Shiro twisted her body and slammed her bow towards the shadow. Trading a few blows with her shadow, Shiro realized that it was going to be hard to even get a hit in since her shadow was on full defense mode. This was someone that not even a Minotaur could hit. "Are you kidding me?" Shiro thought with a twitching smile. However, just as she was about to land another hit, she felt her descent slow down, quickly making some distance between her shadow. Shiro narrowed her eyes. Glancing down, she saw that there was a mirror-like surface beneath her, and she was currently in a fighting arena in the middle of the sky. Honestly, if this was a dinner date, it'll be quite romantic, I suppose. Of course, without anyone beneath me since I wouldn't want them to look up my skirt. Shiro shrugged before stomping down and dashing towards her shadow. Twisting her body, she roundhouse kicked towards her shadow. Seeing her shadow dodge the kick, she notched an arrow and forced her to block. Bang. Launching a punch just after the arrow, Shiro frowned when her shadow managed to duck out of the way just in time. If this was in the past, Shiro would have backed off a little, but after her parents' training, she knows that it was the wrong move. She needs to keep up the pressure and overwhelm herself. Force her shadow to make mistakes and take advantage of that opening. Launching attacks after attacks, Shiro was akin to a raging hurricane which didn't allow you to counterattack at all, despite The shadow being a clone of her, she wasn't able to find a chance to retaliate and was constantly forced to go on the defensive, grabbing her shadows. Hands, Shiro's lips curved into a grin as this was the opening that she needed. Jumping up, she kicked her shadow in the chest with both her legs and didn't let go just yet. Pulling her shadow towards her, Shiro headbutted her in the nose and kneed her in the stomach. Adjusting her grip on her shadow's hands, she pushed up and tried to break her arms. Unfortunately, her strength was lacking a little, however, that was fine. Jumping up, she wrapped her legs around her shadow's neck and slammed her against the ground. Stomping against the spine, she could feel a crack and tried her best to break it completely. Asterisk crack. Breaking her shadow's body in half, Shiro watched as it flickered out of existence. One mistake, and the battle is over. If I was the one who made the mistake, I might be the one on the ground instead. Shiro thought to herself, since she had forced her shadow to make a mistake and capitalized on that moment. If it wasn't for her parents' training, she would have probably been stuck in this stage for a lot longer, since her fighting style was more adaptive than aggressive before. Cracking her neck, she watched as her body was teleported back to the stone tablet. Trial of rivalry completed. Do you wish to continue? Yes, just give me them both at the same time so that I can get it over and done with. Shiro shrugged, merging trial of strength and trial of force. Oh, wait a minute, I was kidding. Shiro paused. However, the tablet ignored her and she was teleported to a new area. Staying silent, Shiro glanced around her and saw the stone tablet next to her. Trial of strength and force. Keep your sanity while under the effects of rage and defeat 1,000 trained warriors. If you lose your sanity for even a moment, the warriors will get a 20% boost in strength. Raising her eyebrow, Shiro felt a sudden burst of killing intent in her mind, but it wasn't enough to make her lose her mind. She was about to say, "Is that all?" but remembered that the trial might make things harder, so she decided to shut her mouth. Instead, cracking her neck, she wondered if she was going to be given a weapon, but soldiers started to appear frown all around her. Well, I guess this'll do then. Shiro cracked her knuckles. She dashed towards the crowd of soldiers. ####. While Shiro was completing her trial, Nyx was currently hosting a small tea party of sorts with a cloaked man with long black hair. His hood covered his face, but one could tell that he seemed rather young thanks to the exposed hands. My, Shiro is rather aggressive, wouldn't you say, Tartarus? Nyx smiled. "Amen. Why did you send her to the Forgotten Realm?" Tartarus asked slowly. "I didn't send her there. It was part of Mother's instructions. Plus, wouldn't it be fun to see if she could complete one of the towers belonging to the five of us with just one divinity?" Nyx grinned. "The chances are low, or rather, they're almost impossible." Tartarus shook his head. "That girl is a miracle worker." Nyx chuckled while pouring some tea for the both of them. "So why have you come to talk to dear old me?" Nyx asked with a smile. "Because the others aren't too pleased with the fact that she's gone to the Forgotten Realm. Once she comes out, there's a good chance that she'll obtain something that could put her on the same footing as us despite only being a Tier 5 entity." Tartarus frowned. "Why do you think her trial is so difficult then? If it was easy to stand on the same footing as the primordial gods, then everyone would be a primordial." Nyx chuckled. "Even so, Tartarus, there is no even so when it comes to Mother's decisions. You understand this. Why do you think Mother has already given something to Shiro?" Nyx cut Tartarus off as she narrowed her eyes. The stare-off continued for a few moments as Tartarus sighed. Is she really that desperate? Of course. This is the final loop of this universe. Each time the universe resets, it's like a child has just died in front of Mother. Obviously, she'd want to avoid this. Since this is the final reset, everything will be rendered to null and the cycle will continue. While we may not remember, Mother will. How many cycles do you think she had observed? Nyx leaned back. Someone like Shiro is an anomaly. While Mother may have seen Shiro in previous cycles, there probably hasn't been a cycle where Shiro had been this powerful. It's a spark of hope for Mother, so I hope you don't extinguish it. Nyx smiled. Tartarus didn't say anything and disappeared from his spot. Looking at the teacup that was still full, Nyx sighed. Rather rude. Phew. Breathing out softly, Shiro glanced around her and looked at the pile of corpses belonging to the soldiers. Most of them had already disappeared, and these were the most recent ones that she had killed, since she was able to control herself. Even with the killing intent trying to make her crazy, the soldiers were rather easy to take care of. If anything, trying to kill 1,000 of them was the main issue since her stamina had its limits, but she managed to hold out in the end. However, she did suffer a few minor injuries during the fight, but they weren't enough to hinder her movements. Too much. Standing up, she could see a portal open up in front of her as there were two statues of Nike decorating the side of the portal. Shrugging her shoulders, Shiro walked through the portal. Looking around her, she saw that she was in the center of a marble temple. In front of her was a statue of Nike. Glancing up at the statue, Shiro had the urge to rest her hand against the base of the statue and remembered that after you complete the trials, you had to touch the statue to receive the divinity. Walking up to the statue, she pressed her hands against the base, suddenly feeling a burning sensation on her back. Shiro furrowed her brows from the sensation, but understood that it was the divinity merging with her body. After a short moment, she could feel a strange energy flood her body, which was a little different from the celestial energy she had come into contact with before. If mana was the lowest form, celestial energy would be the next stage up, and this new energy she felt was akin to the third stage. Taking a deep breath, she glanced at her system and noticed a new interface that was specifically made for this. Trial, Divinities, Divinity of Nike, Slot 2, Slot 3, Slot 4, Slot 5, Slot 6, pressing the Divinity of Nike. Shiro checked the benefits. Divinity of Nike, increased physical parameter, flight, increased speed. Boon of Rivalry, increase physical parameters if you see the opponent as someone you must overcome. Boon of Strength, increased physical parameters. Boon of Force, the longer you fight, the angrier you become. The maximum is a 5% boost to physical parameters. Smiling at the results, she was happy with this divinity. Now then, if I remember correctly, to get out I need to go through a portal that opens up behind the statue. She muttered and started to walk around the statue. Looking at the portal, Shiro smiled and stepped through without hesitation. Now that she had her first and only divinity aside from the 5 primordial ones, she could finally make some progress in earning money as a mercenary and buying some decent weapons with it. After all, a bow is good, but she needed some swords and daggers since close combat was rather difficult with a bow. If it was a gun, then she could easily do close quarters combat with a ranged weapon. But that was hoping for a bit too much. Shielding her eyes for a moment, she found herself back in the cave in front of the gate where she had entered the trial. In front of her was the worried mother who was excited to see the gate shine but was disappointed when she saw Shiro. Ignoring the mother, Shiro walked out of the cave and circulated this new energy she could feel in her body. Unfurling a set of white wings, a golden laurel crown could be seen on her head as she jumped off the side and soared up into the air. Damn, it feels good to do this again, Shiro muttered with a grin. After being forced to travel by foot for most of the year, the feeling of free flight was rather relaxing since this meant that she finally had some power in this world where the strong eat the weak. She finally had partial control over her own fate. Taking a deep breath, she tried to fly as high as she could and looked upon the entire world. Looking at the 5 tall towers in the distance, she narrowed her eyes for a moment before chuckling. Well, it's a little soon to challenge those trials. I'll need some decent weapons first. Just Artemis bow isn't enough for me to accomplish what I've set out to do, she muttered to herself before flying towards the city of Vox, landing roughly 30 minutes away from the city. She furled her wings and walked the rest of the distance. With her boosted physical parameters, she was able to cover the distance in no time at all, which was a great feeling for Shiro. All that's left was to find some jobs that she could take for money and buy some decent weapons. Glancing down at her current outfit, Shiro wondered if she needed to get some armor as well. Defense isn't exactly my best trait, but having some armor to cover that is definitely helpful. The trials are only going to get harder, and the hits I take will increase, Shiro mused to herself while glancing at the notice board. Checking where the blacksmith's was, she started to make her way over there. Since this was a rather big city, the blacksmiths should have some decent equipment. Hopefully, upon arriving at the blacksmith's, Shiro could see hundreds of furnaces burning brightly within the building as the workers had their muscles tanned by the flames. Looking at the crowd, muscle bros that had biceps that looked like they were made from bronze, Shiro couldn't help but furrow her brows a little. She wasn't the biggest fan of muscles. At least not a macho body of muscles. Something more along the lines of lean and muscular was her type. An example of men with this body would be Chun Yu, Nan Tian, and maybe Helion, but he was tipping a little into the macho side of things, shaking her head with a soft smile. She couldn't help but wonder how her other party members were doing, as she had been in this world for a few months now. Walking inside the blacksmith's, she started to walk around, trying to find someone that was either making some good weapons or good armor. "Missy, do you need some help?" One of the blacksmiths called out curiously after seeing Shiro walk around like a lost puppy. Her white hair would reflect the light from the fire quite a bit, so it was rather difficult for someone to not see her. In this situation, yes, actually. Do you happen to know anyone that could make me a powerful set of weapons and armor? Shiro asked with a smile. Do you realize that by asking that, you have essentially insulted me already? The blacksmith forced a smile, since if he did reply to her question, he was essentially saying his weapons and armor were bad. I'll pardon my rudeness then. I'm not familiar with your customs, and I didn't know how I would be able to find the best blacksmith in the city. Shiro apologized with a soft smile. Forget it. I can't exactly say who's the best, as a few of the folks here have Hephaestus divinity of smithing. It all comes down to what they're proficient with making and what you're looking for. If you want heavy armor, Elias is the one you want. He's the long-haired idiot that tied it into a ponytail over there. I mean, which idiot would keep a long hair in a smithy? Anyways, if you want light armor, you'll need to talk to Phaeton. He's the tall, skinny one to our left. It's hard to miss him since he's taller than everyone else here. The blacksmith replied while pointing towards the blacksmiths that are proficient with making armor. As for the weapons, lightweight bladed weapons like swords, daggers, and so on, you should look for the woman called Maria. She's not here today, so you should come back tomorrow early in the morning. There are very few women here, so it's easy to find her. She also has blonde hair, so keep that in mind. For heavy weapons like the great sword, axe, halberd, and so on, Yanis should be able to help you. Short dude, crap ton of muscles over there, he said while pointing at a spot not too far from them. Glancing towards where he was pointing, Shiro could see a short person who was just a little shorter than she was. However, his muscles were gleaming under the light from the fire. He looks like a ball of muscles rather than a person, Shiro thought to herself as her smile started to twitch ever so slightly. Thank you very much. She turned back to the blacksmith and thanked him for his information. You're welcome. He nodded and started to focus his attention back to the weapon that he was making. Since Maria wasn't here at the blacksmith's today, she was going to talk to the one that can give her some light armor first. Walking towards the tall, skinny one called Phaeton, she could see that he was currently forging a set of half-plate that only covered the upper half of the torso along with some arm guards. Excuse me, Shiro called out as Phaeton glanced over at her. Emin, what is it? He asked with a slightly monotone voice. Now that she was up close to the blacksmith, she could tell that he was far above 6 feet and probably was almost at 7 feet. His hair was short on the side, but his bangs were long. If he were to have them swept in front of him, he would cover more than half of his face with ease. He had black hair along with a set of black eyes that seemed a little dull, but Shiro could see some liveliness behind that dullness. I wish to commission a set of light armor for myself. Something that will cover my torso, my shoulders, my forearms, my waist, and potentially the shin area, but that's secondary. Shiro smiled. Man, okay. I've got a few commissions already, so your order will be a little late. The cost can be lowered if you bring me the materials. If not, you'll need to pay the full price. Phaeton nodded his head while bringing his hammer onto the piece that he was currently working on. Okay, what materials do you need? Shiro asked. Depends on what you want. If you want a high-grade armor, the materials needed will be something that people with 2 divinities struggle to obtain. How many divinities do you have? Fedonis asked. Just 1. In that case, you should just pay the full price. I'm not keen on selling armor that isn't the best. It just increases your chances of dying if I gave you half-assed armor. Fedonis suggested. How much is the full price then? Shiro asked. She didn't have much money on her right now, so she'll need to do some jobs to earn some cash. Around 200 gold. Fedonis tilted his head for a moment before replying. 200 gold? Okay, when will you need this money? Shiro asked. Around 2 months? I got a bunch of commissions, so it'll take me around 2 months to go through them all before doing yours. Seems like you don't have enough money for this armor. I don't. I'll go earn enough within these 2 months, though. Shiro chuckled. Very well. I'll give you a token for this order. If you can bring this token back to me in 2 months' time along with the necessary gold, I'll start your commission. Fedonis nodded his head, setting the armor in his hands aside for now. He rummaged around his boxes before pulling out a metal token. Bringing up his hammer, he slammed it down against one side of the token and words started to appear, flicking. The token to Shiro. He focused back on his current armor, glancing down at the token. Shiro read the contents. Order for high-grade light armor. Female. Price, 200 gold. Commission number, 839. Raising her eyebrow, she stored the token away and left the blacksmith's. The next thing she needed to do was actually earn the money. And what better place to do it than the Mercenary Hall? The Mercenary Hall acted similar to how the Adventurers Guild acted back on Earth. There was a huge bounty board, and you can pick up any bounties that you wish to do. Once you accepted a bounty, they'd register you down on a giant notebook. After they noted you down, you would be eligible for the rewards so long as you bring back a proof of extermination such as a head. There was a problem of transporting the body due to the materials that some of the monsters had, but most of them were near villagers, so they could use the postal service to send a message, and the mercenary hall will send some people to collect the corpse for you and note it down. Once the completion of the bounty is complete, they will reward you with the gold writing down on the sheet of paper. Checking the map of the town that was pinned on wooden billboards around the town, Shiro soon found where the mercenary hall was and started to make her way towards the building. When she was roughly halfway to the mercenary hall, Shiro felt two gazes lock onto her from a distance, which caused her to frown, but made no action to show that she'd noticed them just yet. She didn't know their purpose right. Now, after all, arriving at the mercenary hall, she saw that the set of large wooden doors were already swung wide open. Entering the facility, she could see several bounty boards to the left and a bar to the right, where quite a few mercenaries would sit down and relax with one another. In front of her was the registration counter, and a lady could be seen talking to people while writing things down into the giant notebook. Next to the counter were stairs on either side, which led to a second floor, which had essentially the same as the first. Only the bounties were now harder than the ones on the first floor, with a total of 4 floors. She could guess that the 4th floor was filled with the hardest of bounties that only people with 3 divinities could complete. Ignoring the bar, she made her way to the bounty boards. The bounty board was split into 3 sections. One for criminals, one for miscellaneous, and one for monsters. The miscellaneous bounty board was filled with bounties that required you to act as a guard or someone's escort through a forest where combat might happen, but the chances are low. For criminals, it was obviously an assassination contract, so there wasn't much to think about. However, she wasn't interested in the criminal's bounty since hunting down humans was quite annoying. They might have guards protecting them, or they might be stronger than what the bounty suggests, which just complicates things further. The best way to earn money would be through the monster hunting bounties. Walking up to the monster section, she saw some low-tier bounties that mainly involved weak monsters on the first floor, such as an overpopulation of Turka in certain areas. Shaking her head, she walked up to the second floor. Thinking to herself while walking up, she wondered if she should look for the bounty that involved the Minotaur in the section of life. Since she was able to injure its body quite a bit during the last fight, she might be able to slay it for good this time. Plus, she wanted her revenge. The second floor didn't have any mention of the Minotaur, but it did have some bounties that involved flying beasts such as harpies along with some underground monsters which have been consuming the cattle. Furrowing her brows, Shiro decided to go up to the 3rd floor where it mostly had bounties fit for people with 2 divinities. The moment she stepped to the 3rd floor, she could see that there were lots of bounties. More so than both the 1st and 2nd floor combined, with most of them being monsters related. Checking the monster section, she immediately found a bounty for a mysterious monster in the section of life that was inhabiting an old safe spot, but hundreds of travelers have gone missing. They had sent a few people before, but they didn't come back, so the difficulty was increased to people with 2 divinities. As for the bounty rewards, it was increased to 50 gold after repeated failures. Walking up to the registration counter, Shiro waited in the queue patiently. After waiting for a while, it was her turn. "How may I help you?" The lady at the counter smiled after seeing an unfamiliar face. "I want to take the bounty about the mysterious creature living in the forest near the border between the section of life and the section of sky." Shiro replied, as the lady nodded her head. Understood. May I have your name, please? Shiro. All right, Miss Shiro. I have registered you down. There has been an update about this bounty, and that if you can bring back some information, even if you don't kill it, you can get some rewards. The lady reminded with a smile. Okay, I'll keep it in mind. Shiro nodded her head and left the mercenary hall. Now that she had registered herself down for the bounty, she wanted to rest up for the rest of this day so that she could commission for the weapons tomorrow and set off for the Minotaur. However, since her funds were a bit limited right now, she'll need to sleep in the forest again, which she wasn't too bothered about. But before she could leave the city, she saw two ladies approach her with a smile. Mind if we talk for a bit? The lady smiled as Shiro recognized their gaze to be the same one she had sensed earlier. Narrowing her eyes, Shiro nodded her head after a short pause, since it would be good to find out what they want. So where do you want to talk? Or would you rather we talk here in public? Shiro asked as she kept her guard around these two women. The first was a young woman that was around 5 feet 8 inches height and had a set of brown piercing eyes and brown hair. In addition to this, she wore a white one-piece dress with silver armor around her torso and arms. The second woman was a little shorter, roughly 5 feet 2 inches height, and had a cloak to cover most of her body. The only things that Shiro could pick out was the fact that she had black hair, a pair of black eyes along with a neutral expression which seemed to be fixated in the same spot, almost like an emotionless robot. Well, it doesn't matter too much to me, but I think it might be better for us to talk about this in private. It's something that might interest you if you're looking for money, and don't worry, it's not about selling your body. The first woman chuckled. Oh, I do hope that it's legal. Shiro furrowed her brows. Legal is a bit of a stretch, but it's not too far off, I suppose. If I had to say, it's half legal. The woman smirked. Rather ambiguous, no? Can you at least tell me the nature of what you want to talk to me about? Shiro asked. Of course. It's assassination. The woman grinned. ####, sitting around a table in one of the inn rooms that the two had asked for. The shorter woman placed down a giant book on the table, which caused Shiro to be rather curious, but stayed silent about it for now. Right then, so. You wanted to know about why we wanted to speak to you, right? The woman asked while crossing her legs. Yes, I did. Okay, but before that, let us introduce ourselves. My name is Kiona, and she is Melody. We're part of an underground organization, which is specialized in taking assassination orders to kill nobles and those who have committed heinous deeds. Due to the nature of the organization, some of our members have been placed on the bounty board for criminals. You may have seen some of them. We pay our members who complete assassinations with the wealth we have accumulated from killing noblemen/noblewomen. There is no obligation to the organization other than signing a contract to keep the location and information regarding the organization a secret, which means that you cannot tell anyone about us in any way, shape, or form. And that's pretty much all you need to know about us. We kill people for blood money. Why don't you introduce yourself to us? Start with a name. Kiona grinned. Narrowing her eyes, Shiro frowned slightly. The name is Shiro, but before I say more, I want to ask why me? She asked with skepticism. Name Shiro, age unknown, background unknown. First contact was in a village when she was discovered to have killed 2 people and buried them in the forest. After further investigation, it was found out that they were repeat offenders of robbery and are *P. Melody cut in as she opened her book. The pages started to flip before stopping on an image of Shiro who was walking away after burying the people that tried to sneak into her room. Frowning slightly, Shiro glared at the two with caution. Don't be so on guard. Actually, forget that I said that since I'm also on guard to be fair. But yeah, the only thing we need from you is to sign a contract in order to stay silent about the organization. We want you because you have talent, and we need more people like you. If you can sign the contract, we can start showing you the good bounties for more money. Kiona grinned, staying silent for a moment. Shiro shook her head if she wanted money. The mercenary hall was good enough. It's fine. I'm not exactly keen on signing any contracts. Shiro shook her head and stood up. However, before she could stand up properly, she felt the gravity around her increase and she was forced to sit back down. What's the meaning of this? Shiro glared at the woman. It's a real shame, honestly. We choose who we tell our existence to, but there are times where we need to clean up loose ends like you. Most would accept the contract since it's loose, but for people like you, it's different. I can already tell that if you said no, you'll most likely stick with that answer, so we need to be a bit more forceful. We'll have to see if you can leave this place on your own, or if we can force you into a slave contract first. Melody, prepare the contract paper. Kiona snapped her finger and stood up, nodding her head. Melody glanced towards Shiro with slight traces of pity in her eyes that soon disappeared, and she returned to her normal emotionless expression. Hearing what Kiona had said, Shiro furrowed her brows. What a pain. She sighed and glared at Kiona, marking her as someone she must overcome for the sake of survival. Shiro could feel her boon of rivalry activating as a golden laurel crown appeared on her head. New asterisk bang, unfurling. Her wings, she slammed her hands down and shattered the chair apart. Dashing towards the door, she quickly escaped before the two could react. Tisk, I'm surprised. Her first divinity is actually Nike's. Come, prepare the contract paper on the way. Kiona commanded as she dashed after Shiro. Flying out of the inn, Shiro glanced back and saw Kiona charging after her with a red aura, summoning her bow. She turned her body back and fired a few arrows. Unfortunately for her, Kiona only blocked them with her hand and brushed them aside. You might have Nike's divinity as your first one, but I have two divinities. The gap in power can't be overcome. Just give up. Kiona warned as she closed in on Shiro. I've been bridging power gaps since before you were born, young lady. Don't underestimate me. Shiro retorted while firing more arrows. Ironically, she was being truthful as well due to her first life as Nitri. Ignoring the strange response, Kiona cracked her knuckles. Suddenly, her body started to enlarge as her muscles became well-defined. A red aura surged around her body as illusionary tattoos spread along her body which could be seen due to the exposed skin. **T. Seeing this, Shiro widened her eyes since she knew who this divinity belonged to. It was one of the candidates for her first trial. Heracles the demigod. After a short moment, Kiona's illusionary tattoos solidified and her speed increased exponentially. Ducking to the side, Shiro barely managed to avoid her grab and reached out for Kiona's arm. Raising her foot, she kicked towards the elbow in an attempt to break it. However, before her foot could come into contact, she saw Kiona smirking as she reached out for Shiro's foot. But compared to Shiro's divinity, Kiona's prowess in the sky was much worse, and reaching out for Shiro was a big mistake. Halting her attack, Shiro grabbed Kiona's hand and flipped behind her. With her grip on both of Kiona's arms, she kneed her on the back of the neck and sent their bodies plummeting towards the stone pavement of the city. Asterisk bang. Slamming Kiona's head against the pavement, she watched as a spider web of cracks expanded out in an instant. Glancing down at Kiona's face, Shiro could see an enraged glare while blood dripped down the side of her face. Kicking off Kiona's back, Shiro jumped into the sky and started to fly into the sky. Taking advantage of her ability of flight, gritting her teeth, Kiona stood back up and cracked her neck. Asterisk pooey, spitting out some blood to the side, she watched as Melody caught up to her. Put a bounty out of her. Send the bounty to assassins with two divinities. Normal assassins with one divinity can't deal with her. Make sure to mention that she has Nike's divinity so they know what they're up against. Kiona instructed while glaring towards where Shiro had left. Nodding her head, Melody opened her book and started to record some notes down. Soon a bounty of Shiro was created and the image used was when Shiro unfurled her wings in front of them. Shiro dead bounty, 25 gold. Alive bounty, 40 gold. While Melody and Kiona set up the bounty, Shiro had already left the city and landed in the middle of a rock formation not too far away. Furling her wings up, she glanced back with a frown. Che, what the hell is up with people in the past? Were they always so forceful when things don't go as planned? Shiro muttered with annoyance since that'll overcomplicate things a little in the future. Not only did she need to make some money for a decent armor and weapon, she also needed to be careful of assassins. Sighing softly, she decided to rest up for now. Tomorrow she'll go talk to the lady that makes swords, and after would be days of monster hunting for money starting from the Minotaur. Waking up with a slight frown, she glanced at the sky and saw that it was still early morning. However, despite the fact that it was early morning, she was currently surrounded on all sides by giant muscular mole rats of sorts. Seeing their flabby Exposed skin for the first thing in the morning wasn't exactly pleasing for Shiro as she sighed and massaged her eyes. Raising her hands, she swiped down on them, but nothing happened. Blinking her eyes for a moment, she face-palmed as she forgot she wasn't able to create swords anymore. With the feeling of energy in her body, she thought she could summon her blades. URG, see what you've done? Being rudely awoken by you guys made me remember that I only have a bow right now. Che, if it was back on Earth, blades would have pierced through you right now. Shiro yawned and stood up. Normally, the giant mole rats would have attacked her by now, but they were frozen in place by the large amount of killing intent she was releasing right now. If she still had her passive that could freeze the surroundings, the entire area would have become a frozen tundra by now. Stretching her body, Shiro glared at the closest mole rat and summoned her bow. Well, I suppose you guys and act as my morning workout to wake me up, she said and pulled back on her bow. Looking at the small mountain of 5 corpses, Shiro cracked her neck and sighed. My body's been kinda stiff lately, though I suppose I haven't really taken the chance to relax. My body, I guess. Shiro muttered while doing a quick massage on her shoulders. I wonder if the girls are good at massages. I'm not really keen on letting someone else touch me regardless of gender. She mused to herself before glancing at the corpses. Looking at their flabby skin, Shiro wasn't the most excited about using them as a source of food, but breakfast was needed in the end. But the unfortunate thing was that she no longer had a bladed weapon she could use to cut up the monsters, so her only choice was to sell the monster to get some money. Thinking about it for a moment, Shiro decided to see if there were any bounties relating to these mole rats. If there was, she could use it to make some quick cash. Hiding the corpses so that no one could take them away from her, she made her way back to the city, making sure that she was as stealthy as possible since she didn't know if Kiona and Melody were still nearby. She walked through the city without attracting attention. Arriving at the mercenary hall with ease, Shiro glanced towards the bounty board and saw that for giant mole rats near the city was only around 10 silvers, each due to their quick reproduction along with the dangers they hold against normal people. They're quite fearless and would even hunt near the gates of the city. Walking up to the reception, Shiro waited until it was her turn. Hello, how may I help? The receptionist asked with a smile. I was attacked by 5 of those giant mole rats. I can't bring their body here, but I know where it is. Shiro replied. I see. I'll call for a higher-ranked staff to verify this with you, and he can give you the silver after you verified this. The receptionist nodded, gesturing for Shiro to wait. For a moment, she left the counter. After a short while, she returned with a serious-looking man with a small notepad. Please show this man where you left the corpses, and he shall pay you accordingly. The receptionist smiled. Nodding her head, Shiro started to leave while the man followed behind her. Walking through the city, she could tell that this man didn't want to talk at all and was only focused on the serious task at hand, which she was rather grateful for. Arriving outside the city, she showed him where she had hidden the corpses. Do you have a bow on you? There are signs of arrow wounds, but I see no bow. The man asked while glancing back at her. I do. Shiro nodded and summoned Artemis Bow. Raising his eyebrow in slight surprise, the man started to check up on the remaining corpses before nodding his head. As promised, each mole rat is worth 10 silvers. There are 50 silvers in this pouch, he said while handing her a rather hefty pouch. Thank you. Shiro took the pouch and started to make her way back to the city. Checking the money so that she wasn't ripped off, she nodded in satisfaction when she saw that there was indeed 50 silvers. I should get myself something to eat first, then see if the blacksmith lady is there. It's still rather early after all, Shiro muttered while glancing up at the sky. The sun had barely risen as the morning glow slowly pushed away the night sky. Looking around for a place where she could get some breakfast this early on, she could only find inns that sold food this early. Choosing the inn where she didn't break the door off, she paid for a cheap but filling meal. After the meal, she saw that the blacksmith still needed a while to open up, so she decided to take a quick stroll around the city with how early she was. Not many of the stores were open, but surprisingly, the library was open, so she entered to find some information on minotaurs. Welcome back. Seems like you had some luck with your first divinity. Did you succeed with Nike's trial? You did ask for her information last time. Glancing toward the source of the voice, Shiro saw that it was the same woman as the last time she was here. Amen. Thank you for your help. Shiro nodded with a smile. Haha, don't thank me, it was the books that helped you. The woman chuckled. And you helped me find the books. Without your intervention, I might not have found them. Shiro shook her head. My, I suppose it'll be rude of me not to accept your thanks then. So what books are you looking for today? The woman asked with a soft smile. Minotaurs, please. Understood. Please wait for a moment. Summoning a butterfly like last time, the woman commanded it to lead Shiro to the required books about minotaurs. Also, seen as though you're looking for information on minotaurs, may I take it as you're going for the minotaur bounty from the mercenary hall? I am indeed. Shiro nodded her head. Then you might want to be careful, as the section of life is not exactly kind against those that took a life within the section. Even though the area is quite far from the center where the influence of Gaia's tower is highest, the forest will still attack you if you kill the minotaur. If you can, try to. Bring it to the section of air, I suppose. The woman reminded. Thank you. I'll keep that in mind. Shiro replied with a smile. Following after the butterfly, Shiro arrived at the third floor and saw that there were quite a few books on minotaurs. Since she only wanted some information on its combat style and abilities, she skipped the ones that talked about his history. While she did spend a few hours fighting it, and it only showing brute force along with the labyrinth, she wanted to make sure that it didn't have any more skills up his sleeves. Checking through his information, she was rather surprised to see that the Minotaur indeed had something up his sleeves. However, the funny thing was that due to her low power, she wasn't able to trigger his ability. When the Minotaur takes a huge amount of damage in an instant or in close succession, he'll be able to activate a rage-like state where his physical parameters increase dramatically in order for him to hunt down the one who did this to him. The more the enemy hits him, the longer this state lasts. For her, she wasn't hitting him hard enough to activate this state, so he was blocked from one of his strongest abilities. So if I see him again, I'll need to control my damage output with the bow, or else he'll activate this ability against me. Once that happens, it'll be quite a pain since I'm already struggling with dodging his attacks now. Never mind when he rages. Shiro mused to herself before putting the book back. Saying thanks to the receptionist once more, she started to make her way towards the blacksmiths. There were signs of people setting up their stations, but there were only one or two, so Shiro decided to wait by the side. After around an hour or so, more and more blacksmiths started to arrive, spotting a woman that matched the description of Maria who had blonde hair. Shiro stood up and walked towards her. Before Shiro could even say anything, she saw Maria grit her teeth in anger and grab a nearby sword. Trash! She shouted out and snapped the sword in half. Widening her eyes, Shiro paused for a moment and wondered if she should leave Maria alone. Despite her delicate appearance, her sudden surge of rage gave her second thoughts about approaching casually. However, Maria had already spotted Shiro, and it was too late. Cough. I apologize about that unsightly display. How can I help you? Maria smiled sweetly as Shiro nodded her head after a short pause. Ryder, it's fine. So someone told me that I should look for you if I wanted a good bladed weapon. Shiro replied. Oh, okay, come, sit down. Maria nodded her head enthusiastically as it reminded Shiro of what Sylvia was like when she talked about good healing equipment. Dragging Shiro over to a chair, Maria started to dig through her equipment. Well, you've come to the right place. Tell me what you want. Great sword? Long sword? Dagger? Maria asked while grabbing some examples from her pile of weapons. A good sword and a dagger, I guess. Sword for a main damage source and dagger for something I can throw. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. Shiro replied. That I can do. But I don't make multiple trash weapons like a disposable dagger. No. I'll make you a good one. How does one enchanted with a return enchantment sound? You'll activate your energy and summon the dagger next to you. As for the sword, I'll have to see how you fight. Here, give this sword a swing. Each type of sword has their own history, and depending on how the user uses it, a new legacy could be born. An example would be a sword that could be used by a hero. If it's in the hands of someone incompatible, then it might as well be a barn tool. But if used properly, it could become a legend. Maria grinned. Now give this sword a swing, and I'll see what kind of history you could create, she said while handing Shiro a normal long sword. Taken aback by her enthusiasm, Shiro blinked her eyes before nodding her head. Holding the sword in her hands, She closed her eyes and envisioned the image of the Minotaur in front of her, remembering his strength and speed. She took a deep breath. Entering an offensive stance, she lunged towards the Minotaur. Flicking her hand, she slashed against his chest while he swung back with the club. Shifting her weight, she brought the sword to her side and parried the club, and brushed it aside before cleaving up with her blade. Reopening her eyes, she glanced to the side and saw Maria watching with an intense stare. Okay, I think I got it. Your fighting style is highly reactive and you like to take the offensive. You avoid, or rather, redirect blows when you can. A sword you need isn't something that can help you block, but something that can help you parry. With your technique, a thin sword is good as well since you want attack power instead of defense power. Oh, but a thin sword might not be able to parry well for you. This is going to be a hard sword to make. However, the potential story this sword can create in your hands is worth it, Maria said with a serious expression which slowly turned into a grin. So I'll make you one sword and one dagger. Come back in a month. She waved her hand and started to look through her materials. Huh, what about payment? Shiro asked. All right, payment. Usually, this would cost you around 800 to 1,000 gold, but I'll charge you 300 instead. It's not often I get to make a unique sword like the one that you want. Maria shrugged. Arab, so can you buy the sword and dagger? She glanced back. Ah, yes, I can. Shiro nodded. Then come back in a month. Seeing this, Shiro was once again taken aback. Don't mind her, she's always like this. She's a little too enthusiastic about bladed weapons. A voice sighed behind her. Glancing back, she saw that it was the same man who had introduced her to Faden and Maria. Ah, thank you very much, by the way. Shiro smiled. You're welcome. But it's not often that Maria gives a discount to people. She must have seen good potential from you. The man laughed. Amen. Talking to the man for a little longer, she bid farewell and started to make her way out of the city. After she left the city gates, she unfurled her wings and started to fly towards the borders. Now that she had the power of flight, she was able to use the air tunnels to increase her speed even more. That a journey that should take her quite a few days was reduced to only a day thanks to her power of flight. Unfortunately, on her way here, she saw the town that was turned into a floating island. The only thing living on the island was monsters, and human corpses could be seen everywhere. Some were half-eaten, while others were incomplete. There were even some corpses beneath the island, as Shiro guessed that they must have either jumped off or got thrown off. Giving the deceased people of the small town a silent prayer, Shiro continued her journey. ####, landing near the border where the 5 air tunnels were. Shiro glanced towards the forest that represented her entrance to the section of life. I do hope that the Minotaur didn't die just yet. Shiro muttered to herself since the last time she ran into the Minotaur. She had injured both his eyes and pierced his body with a bunch of arrows. Shaking her head, she decided to rest up at the border for the night since she had been traveling for the entire day. Killing some birds for a meal at night, she ate her fill and slept in one of the trees. Waking up the next morning, Shiro flew above the forest and tried to remember where she had seen the labyrinth last time. Tracking her position through the mental map that she had constructed, Shiro eventually found her previous spot. Walking around for a bit, she was disappointed to see that the labyrinth was now gone. Well, he should be nearby. It takes a while for a Minotaur to move his labyrinth to a new location since it takes some preparation. Even for a monster like the Minotaur, he understood innately on how to perform the ritual for his labyrinth. Sighing softly, Shiro started to dash around the forest in an attempt to find where his new labyrinth was, searching the entire area to the best of her abilities. Shiro was sad to see that there was no sign of a labyrinth at all. Furrowing her brows, Shiro flew up into the air and looked at the entire forest from the sky. Looking around for several signs of a labyrinth, she was surprised that she didn't even need to try that hard, as there was something shimmering in the distance. Understanding that was the sign of the Minotaur trying to construct a labyrinth, Shiro flew towards it as fast as she could. Upon arrival, Shiro was shocked at the scene. The Minotaur was on the verge of death with both his eyes still blind while a huge beast-like monstrosity stood over him with a snarl. The beast was a strange amalgamation of different monsters, and it was similar to a chimera but not the same. His head was somewhat deformed, as it was similar to a ram's skull with skin tightly stretched along the surface. for amber eyes swiveled around the sunken eye sockets as they all focused on the Minotaur, who was struggling to escape. His jaws had bones jerking out of him as it pushed the tightly stretched skin to the point of almost breaking. There was only a single set of teeth around his mouth, but his tongue was a horrifying lump of flesh, which looked like it could fork out towards multiple directions. If Shiro had to describe it quickly, she'll describe it as a disgusting merge of multiple tongues that on top of his head were two large horns, which looped behind his ears before pointing forward. One of the horns was chipped on the tip, while the other was still menacingly sharp. He didn't have a lot of hair, but there were some tufts that could be seen around his body. Without the hair covering his body, the deformities were displayed in plain sight. It had ripped wings protruding from his back as the wings looked like a fusion of both bird and bat wings, with ripped holes littering the wing membrane. It was hard to imagine that he could continue to fly. Looking at the back, one could see his spine in clear detail as it led to his tail. At this point, some of the skin had been ripped apart, but no blood could be seen. The only thing that could be seen was the chilling white which represented the bone. With goat-like hooves as legs and long, sharp, fleshless claws, the demonic monstrosity walked towards the Minotaur with ominous intent. Searching through her memories, she couldn't remember who this monster was, but she knew it was much worse than a Minotaur. The problem was whether or not she should make herself known or not. Just looking at the monster's body made her feel on edge, never mind wanting to fight it. Watching him wrap his skinless tail around the Minotaur's neck, the monster lifted the Minotaur up and started to tear away at his face. Hearing the pain-filled cries of the Minotaur, Shiro furrowed her brows. Normally, I'd want to fight that thing, but not this time, Shiro thought to herself and hopped down from the sky. Hiding near the trees, she kept her eyes on the situation so that she could grab the Minotaur's head or something as a proof of completion. After all, he was gold that she needed to pay for her sword. Hiding in the shadow of a tree, she tried to suppress her presence as much as she could. Watching the monster brutalize the Minotaur, Shiro didn't realize, but her back was already covered with cold sweat. Suddenly, the monster glanced up and cracked open his mouth. "Did you enjoy watching that?" It growled with a deep voice. All four of his eyes snapped towards Shiro's location as she felt her alarms ring out immediately. "Cack, cack, cack. It seems like you had some business with this moron. You can have him. His blindness damaged my horn after all." The monster laughed as his voice crackled with each word. Dropping the corpse, the monster walked towards Shiro slowly. Strangely enough, it felt like there was something binding Shiro's body as she was not able to move at all no matter how hard she tried. "You seem to not know who I am. Seems like times have changed. How long did I sleep before this bull woke me up?" he muttered while making eye contact with Shiro. "Are you curious about my name? What I am? What I'm talking about? Your eyes seek answers." He licked his lipless mouth with his tongue, swallowing a mouthful of saliva. Shiro nodded her head. "They called me the ancient terror among many names, but none know my true name. I'm an abomination born from the pool of corruption. I am here to destroy the forgotten realm and escape this prison of gods." Suddenly, he reached out towards Shiro as she was able to break out of the lock and make some distance between them. "Oh," the monster muttered as his body wavered slightly. "It seems I'm still tired from waking up right now. You're lucky, girl." He grinned and started to meld into the shadows. After a short moment, his body had disappeared, and all that remained was the corpses of the Minotaur. Without the monster's presence, Shiro was finally able to breathe properly, as she had suppressed her breathing to not make a single noise. "What the hell?" Shiro panted slightly. "Ancient terror. Abomination born from the pool of corruption," she thought with a frown. Taking a deep breath, she had a short break so that she could calm herself. Once she was calm, she had a frown on her face. The Forgotten Realm had more secrets than what she had expected. The Null Area, Dread Sapling, and now the Ancient Terror. Shaking her head, she looked towards the Minotaur with a complicated expression. Due to what she had done to the Minotaur, it had accidentally woken up something it shouldn't have. In one way, one can think of it as her fault since she was the catalyst to this. Sighing softly, she walked over to the Minotaur's corpse and started to separate its head from the rest of the body that would serve as a proof since she couldn't take the rest of the body. Normally, she would have been tempted to cook the rest of the body, but right now, She wanted nothing more than to leave this place. Tying the head with some makeshift ropes, Shiro unfurled her wings and immediately left the spot. Soon after, she felt dark particles appear and merge into the monstrosity that Shiro had seen. How wasteful! He glanced at the headless corpse of the Minotaur and reached out with his hand. Suddenly, teeth erupted out of the ground and started to consume the corpse. Disgusting crunching sounds rang out as the body soon disappeared. Glancing towards where Shiro had left, he chuckled to himself before leaving for good. Flying out of the section of life as fast as she could, Shiro glanced back and sighed that it was only when she left the forest did she feel safe. During her time in the forest, it was like there was a constant set of eyes locked onto her back, tracking her wherever she went, always watching. It reminded her of her time in the labs, where every camera would observe her every action, monitoring her health, how she moved, and her habits. That it was highly uncomfortable, and the stare of that monstrosity felt the same. Furrowing her brows, Shiro figured that she should go to the library and find out as much information as she could about this guy. Making her way back to the city as quickly as she could, she was rather eye-catching with the head of a minotaur behind her. Furling her wings, she walked to the mercenary hall. Walking up to the third floor where she had seen the bounty, Shiro waited for her turn. "Hello, it seems like you want to turn in a bounty." The woman smiled after seeing Shiro. "Amen. I found out what the monster was in the section of life along with killing it. If I remember, the reward was 50 gold, right?" Shiro nodded. "Indeed. If it was a minotaur, then it would make sense why hundreds of travelers would find it hard to escape. How come the head seemed like it's been attacked by something else, though?" The woman asked. "I found it weakened. The arrow wounds are what I caused." Shiro shrugged, summoning her bow. "I see. Please give me a moment while we verify your bounty completion. Regardless of the result of verification, you will get a certain amount of gold. The process should be complete by the end of the day. Take this token as a proof and come back at the end of the day," the woman said while handing over a token. Nodding her head, Shiro handed the head over to the woman and started to make her way to the library. Entering the facility, the woman was about to say something when she furrowed her brows. Shaking her head, she smiled once more. "You have come back rather quickly. Seems like your hunt was successful." She smiled. "Somewhat. I ran into something strange, though. Do you have anything on a being known as the Ancient Terror and the Pool of Corruption?" Shiro asked. "Where did you hear those terms from?" The woman asked, her voice sounding a lot less carefree than before. Naturally, Shiro picked this up and understood the person knew what was going on. "From the monstrosity himself," Shiro replied with a heavy tone. "I'm surprised that you lived to tell the tale then. Give me a moment. I shall personally guide you to the location. I also need to purify you, as it seems like it has planted a seed of corruption within you. If nothing is done, you'll become a corruption monster whose only goal is to create more pools of corruption." The woman narrowed her eyes and gestured for Shiro to come with her. "What about your post? Is there anyone else to guide the people?" Shiro asked curiously. "There is already someone on the way. But enough about that. Come with me." The woman nodded her head. Walking to the back of the library on the first floor, the woman pressed her hand against the wall as a magic circle expanded out and a set of stairs appeared beside them. Walking down the steps, Shiro watched as the entrance was sealed back up once more. Following behind the woman, Shiro couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable. "If you're feeling uncomfortable, then that's the corruption sapling acting up," the woman said as Shiro was slightly surprised but kept quiet. Following behind her, they walked through a few doors and down several steps before arriving in front of a sealed room. Opening the door, the woman had Shiro sit down on a chair in the center. "So do you want to learn about the history, or do you want to get rid of the corruption sapling first?" she asked with a smile. "I'll go for the latter." Shiro forced a smile, since she didn't even notice the corruption sapling in her body. "Good choice." The woman nodded her head. Snapping her fingers, golden chains appeared around the room and lashed towards Shiro's limbs. Wrapping around the ankle and the wrist, Shiro furrowed her brows. Suddenly, butterflies started to appear around the room before landing on her arm. SSSS. Taking a sharp breath in, Shiro watched as the butterflies started to suck something out of her arm. Their golden wings had tiny spots of purple, which slowly increased in size. "I'm surprised. Normally, people will cry out in pain when this happens. Since you're not going to scream, let's do the history lesson now. I'll tell you about the ancient terror and that corrupted sapling that's been implanted into you. The woman smiled as Shiro nodded her head with a forced smile. Good. The ancient terror is something akin to humanity's corruption. He's the amalgamation of the sins performed by humans in ancient times. I do not know for what reason the Forgotten Realms were created, but I do know that at the beginning, the ancient terror was supposed to be a failsafe, something to protect us from harm rather than commit it. After hundreds of years, the ancient terror was slowly being corrupted by the sins. It wanted to escape from this realm, to run away from his responsibilities. And it was almost successful. Almost. The gods intervened and isolated this realm. Humans were granted powers in the form of divinities, but back then they were more powerful than the current generation. Due to the ancient terror being at the height of his power, the corruption in the surroundings constantly tempered the body of humans, allowing them to take on stronger divinities and more power from the gods. They had 6 slots for divinities, much like how you are right now. The woman smiled as Shiro felt exposed. Ah, but don't worry. I am a guardian of sorts. Along with my sisters, we guard the libraries, show people to their desired books, and oversee the world. We don't see things like how normal people do. We see things from a different perspective, hence why I can tell that you have 6 slots like those that come before us. Normally, I would have been able to see you just fine, but the moment you entered the forest, the vision was cut short, which was very strange, but I didn't expect you to run into a piece of the ancient terror. This is also why I know that you were looking for the Minotaur inside the section of life despite the bounty, saying it was a mysterious monster, huh? The woman laughed. After the gods intervened with the help of people, they were able to split the ancient terror into separate pieces and lock them away. The one you ran into was most likely the core of his being. Usually, the core would be transported around the land thanks to its prison, which keeps him in a state of constant slumber. But due to some external interferences, it seems like it woke him up much earlier than planned. She sighed. So as I was saying, me and my sisters are guardians, but we cannot fight. The most I can do is provide knowledge and point you in the right direction while keeping an eye on the world. If things had gone as planned, the ancient terror would have awoken in a few years after we picked out some heroes from the people of the world. We have repeated this process a few times now, so we know what to do. But there are people moving in the shadows. A while ago, there had been a case of someone planting one of the corruption saplings in a village. Now that the sapling has bloomed into a pool of corruption, monsters will soon appear from the pool and spread the corruption. The more the corruption is spread, the weaker the influence from the towers are. In the section of life, the restriction on murder would cease to exist, and the forest wouldn't be able to protect the people anymore. Surprising, isn't it? One would think that Gaia's protection would be for the land and plants, but no, it was for humans. The protection stopped the monsters from killing them, since doing so would turn the entire forest against them. However, if the corruption was to keep spreading, there will no longer be any protection for us humans. This is the same in other sections. The section of night has powerful guardian monsters that will turn against corruption the moment they see it rather than humans. The section of time tends to rewind time so that the monsters can be surrounded with ease. The section of sky provides quick escape in the form of air tunnels along with islands that can act as strategic points. Of course, the monsters here are focusing on humans right now, but once the corruption appears, they'll turn their focus immediately. This is the same with the other sections. For the entire world to turn against them, you can see how much this corruption is despised, can't you? The woman chuckled as Shiro nodded while sweat filled her head. And yes, the feeling of getting the corruption drained from her was rather painful, but due to her tolerance, she was able to endure it. There isn't any secure way to get rid of the corruption. It's either split it apart and forced into a sealed slumber or transfer it to a new host. Me and my sisters have been trying out best to search for a way, but so far there hasn't been any significant improvements. The woman sighed. However, during this, there was something odd with the butterflies. The purple spots started to expand. A sliver of red was seen in the center. Twitching a moment, the butterflies started to flicker as the woman widened her eyes in confusion. "What is this?" she muttered. Before she could take a closer look, the red light expanded into circuits and devoured the butterfly in an instant. Seeing this, Shiro immediately recognized it to be the error element that she had obtained. Glancing at her arm, she could see a black metal-like substance spread up from her fingertips and cover her arms. Flinching slightly, Shiro glared at the circuit, who seemed to snicker at her before retracting. Huh? How? I don't sense the corruption anymore. It was devoured. The woman looked at her in confusion. This thing is basically a stronger version of the corruption. Shiro forced a smile, as she didn't expect Error 403 to have followed her here. Glancing at her system, she saw the simple description of the element. It enhances your weapons and unarmed strikes. If someone who knew of her skill saw this, they would flip a table and shout out lies. However, it was no time to wonder about what her skill did, as the butterflies had completely disappeared. This is out of my expectations. I'll need to talk with my sisters, since this could be something to help us get rid of the corruption. The woman frowned. But wouldn't a new one appear? It is an amalgamation of sins, no? I doubt humans would stop sinning. If they did, they wouldn't be humans anymore. Shiro asked. Yes, but the time it takes for a new one to appear is much longer than how long it takes for him to awaken from a sealed slumber. The woman replied, while making a few butterflies. Watching them fly through the walls, she sighed before turning to Shiro. You are so full of surprises. When I first saw you, I was shocked to see that a person in this era had 6 slots. Now that I see you again, you've obtained a Tier 2 divinity, met the ancient terror, and apparently you own something that is more powerful than the corruption, which couldn't be detected by me. Who are you? She asked with a soft smile. First, name Shiro, surname Asakura. Forever 18, a professional logic breaker and piercer of asses. Pleased to meet you. Pardon. The woman blinked her eyes in confusion. It's a new introduction I've been working on, haha. Something I think I should use when I meet someone remotely interesting, I guess. Either that, or I stick to my usual sup. Introduction. What about your name? Shiro shrugged, since she hadn't learned her name yet. Plus, they'll most likely be interacting with each other more from now on, so she might as well get it out of the way. My name is Quella. I'm the Watcher of this library and the guide for heroes.